old saying goes, the night is always darkest before the dawn. On Election Day 2024, it felt like America's brightest days were behind her. But dawn broke with Donald Trump's election, shining brighter as Republicans held both chambers of Congress. This victory offers a chance for serious reforms and a new birth of freedom, simply by fulfilling the bold campaign promises President Trump made. Decades of government bloat and corruption have fueled propaganda and weaponized agencies against Christians, parents, and their children, also known as the best things America has. Delivering on these promises is vital to preserve our nation and hold power against a corrupt Democrat Party, one that sees America as a global black eye, a Democrat Party that pushes sex change procedures on kids and men and women's private spaces and sports, a Democratic Party that seeks to eliminate parental rights entirely, and a Democratic Party that shields terrorist cartel gang members over our own citizens. If we lose power, it'll be because we failed to deliver on our promises, and we'll deserve it. Our guest today is hell-bent on ensuring that we save America. Young, smart, and tough, he's moving fast. What's it like being a new member of Congress in 2025? Will we pass President Trump's big, beautiful bill? And what are our biggest challenges? Here to discuss all this is my favorite new Congressman, Brandon Gill. Congressman, welcome to the Terry Schilling Show.
Thanks for having me on.
All right, let's just dig right into it. The House passed the big, beautiful bill over in the Senate now. What are your favorite parts about it, and what was it like getting that thing over the finish line?
You know, it was a long process getting it over to the finish line. You know, whenever you have a piece of legislation that's this big, every single step of the negotiations are kind of in the public eye. You know, you'll get news updates on your phone. This person doesn't like this part of the bill. This other person doesn't like some other part of the bill. But ultimately, we were able to get it done. We got it passed. My favorite part of this is the border security. You know, that was, in my opinion, that was the number one issue of the past election cycle. That is, if there was any single thing that voters elected Republicans to do, it was secure the border and deport illegal aliens.
Yes.
And this bill does that. It provides billions of dollars in funding for completing the border wall, hundreds of miles of border wall, hundreds of miles of river barriers. It increases ICE's footprint by 50% by hiring new ICE agents, funds deportation beds, deportation flights, all of the things that we said we were going to do on border security, this bill does. So that is my favorite part of it. Now, there's a lot of other good things, which I'm sure we'll talk about as well. But that to me is really the highlight here.
It's come under fire from Democrats, which, you know, President Trump in his joint address to Congress said even if he invented, you know, the cure to cancer, Democrats would be against that. Right. But Chris Murphy is out there saying that these cuts are going to hurt families. That just sounds preposterous to me and more hysteria. What do you have to say to that?
You know, what Democrats like to talk about is what we're doing on Medicaid. And here's the reality. We're taking 4.8 million people who are working age, able-bodied people who are not working or seeking work. We're simply saying that those people need to be working before they're going to get Medicaid benefits. That's a very straightforward
Seems very
proposition.
common sense.
It's very common sense. You know, Republicans and conservatives have talked a lot about getting the welfare queens off of the welfare rolls. That's what this bill does. We're getting 1.4 million illegal aliens off of Medicaid and off of other forms of welfare. Those are things that the vast majority of Americans agree with. Whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, those are common sense things. Now, Democrats are upset about it, and I think that it's just a different vision for the country. Democrats measure success by the number of people that they can get on the dole on public welfare, and can get beholden into this trap, this cycle of welfare and dependency. Republicans measure success by the number of people that we can lift out of poverty, lift out of the welfare rolls, and make them self-sufficient. That's what this bill helps do.
No, that's such a great point. That Democrats really do. Their idea of success would be to be having more people on the government dole.
Oh, right. It would be a total takeover of our healthcare system. It would be a single payer. You wait in line for 3 or 4, 5 or 9 months before you get routine medical treatment, because that is sort of the European style nanny state that the left wants for this country. This bill helps people get healthcare independently off of Medicaid, which should be everybody's goal.
No, that's right. One thing, we've talked a little bit about the immigration policies that have been in here, and you've been critical, not just to the immigration aspect of it, but others that we'll get into. Talk to us a little bit more about some of the immigration provisions that are in there, and what do you have to say to those that say that these policies are too harsh?
First of all, I think one good thing about this bill is all of the things I mentioned earlier, funding the border wall or river barriers or ICE, all those things cost money. But what this bill does is help shift the cost to pay for all of that onto the illegal aliens or people coming into the country. So we have fees for all kinds of different immigrants coming in, and I think that that's fair. I think that the American people shouldn't have to pay for the burden of immigration enforcement and of many of these policies that we need to implement, and that the American people voted for us to implement. So I think that's something that's sort of unique about this bill that doesn't get talked about very often.
Well, it's just fascinating how far the Democratic Party has come. I mean, they're actually arguing that people that have no right to be in this country, they're actually making our country more dangerous. We're seeing all this violence, sexual assaults have increased. We've seen these girls get murdered by just jogging in what was once safe communities. And they want to actually pay these people, incentivize them to come here. It's just nuts.
Right, and they want to do it with really no restrictions on who's coming in. There's no vetting. Put it this way, Republicans want to create a country where somebody can enter the workforce and can get a house and raise a family in a community where you don't have to worry about getting raped whenever you're going out for your jog in the morning. And then you can go to schools that aren't filled with radical leftist indoctrination, and then go to work and not have to worry about your wages being suppressed because of the mass importation of illegal aliens. That's the country we would like to create, a safe, prosperous America. Democrats are fighting us every step of the way. And the amazing thing is, no matter what the issue is, if there's an illegal alien involved, Democrats will side with the illegal alien.
No, Democrats have firmly planted themselves on the side of the enemies of America. Mm-hmm. And speaking of the enemies of America, I want to talk about NPR and PBS. Yep. One thing, I mean, I've just been so impressed with you, and I'm not just kissing your butt. Freshman members don't secure these types of provisions, and I know that because my dad was a freshman member, and it took him months and months and months. And you're already way further ahead of where my dad was, and he was much older than you. So I'm very impressed with your track record. But let's talk about NPR and PBS, because I think people still think that PBS is like Mr. Rogers and, Sesame Street. Let's unpack this a little bit and why you decided to be like the champion and the guy that really did. You are the guy that was responsible for these provisions being included in the big, beautiful bill.
Well, I appreciate that. The thing about NPR and PBS is this is something that Republicans have been talking about for a long time. I mean, for decades now, going back to the 90s. And there have been times in the past whenever we've gotten close to defunding them. And what the left would do is they would roll out Big Bird, and they would bring Big Bird to everybody's office, and they would say, you're taking away good cartoons from little children, and you're the evil party. Well, I don't think that was fair at all. We shouldn't have been funding them then. But I'll tell you one thing about Sesame Street is PBS doesn't even own Sesame Street anymore. They spun it off to HBO in 2015. And what it seems to have been replaced with is radical left-wing indoctrination cartoons. You have cartoons where you have transgender characters, gay pride parades. I mean, stuff that most Americans, including a lot of Democrats, think is inappropriate for young children. And that's just PBS. Think of NPR, which is routinely running cover for Democrats and attacking Republicans all the time. I mean, they very famously, in their own words, declared that the Hunter Biden laptop story was a distraction, and they chose not to cover it. They put out a press release about it. Here's why we're not going to cover this. That was the biggest news story of the decade, and they deliberately chose. And our tax dollars are funding them. So this is something that's been a long time coming. I think that we've been able to highlight not only a lot of the bias that you see in those networks, but how crazy and just how crazy the people who run these organizations are. I mean, they're just absolute lunatics.
Well, I forget the name of the CEO of NPR, but she was
Catherine
actually
Marr.
Yeah, she was out there saying that sometimes the truth can be a distraction and get in the way of accomplishing the mission. Like, that is pure communist propaganda.
It is. You watch her. It was in a lecture. I think it was a TED Talk, and it is like something right out of 1984. It is truth truth is fundamentally relative. We can't know what it is, so we should just all sort of invent our own truths and come up with some process for mediating differences. I mean, it's really wacky stuff. But she also has a long history of saying some really offensive things too. You know, America is addicted to white supremacy. Things like that, very disparaging things about the president. And she put all this stuff out on Twitter for the rest of the world to see. And after that, she was still chosen to be head of NPR. She did a lot of that before she was head of NPR. So that's the kind of people that they're bringing into these organizations. We know that almost every single person who works at NPR is a registered Democrat. That's a problem. That's not unbiased news. That is left-wing propaganda.
Well, look, you're not that much younger than me. I'm 38, but when I was growing up, at least when I was a kid, it was tough to figure out what these, anchors and what these guys in news, what their political party and political affiliation, they did such a better job of faking it, at least.
Right. Yeah. They knew how to hide it. And we've gotten to a point, and you see this in journalism schools now, where young journalism students are not taught to seek the truth or to hold power to the fire, as they often say, but are actually just explicitly left-wing activists. They say that our goal is to make the world a better place and to create this left-wing utopian vision that the majority of Americans find really not only distasteful, but morally repugnant.
Let's talk about Elon and Doge. Did you work with them at all? Did you come into contact with them? What was that like? And do you think they're going to have a lasting legacy?
I think they are. We talk a lot about all the great things that Elon did, but I think that the biggest part is that all of the work that he did is going to far outlast his tenure in the White House. He really took a sledgehammer to the administrative state and changed the way that we think about funding the federal government. And those are things I think that will keep with us. A lot of the reforms he did are also very lasting, taking off 12 million people who were over the age of 120 off of Social Security rolls. He canceled.
Egregious.
It's so egregious. I mean, think about how we even got here, that there was virtually no oversight of this. He canceled over 500,000 government credit cards that were going to who knows what. He implemented the Defend the Spend program, which simply says that whenever the Treasury is mailing out checks, they need to justify where that money's going. Just write down, this is going to X, Y, and Z. That's it.
They weren't
doing that previously.
They would have failed any audit. I mean, the thing that I loved, well, two things I loved about him. He psyoped the Democrats into defending waste, fraud, and abuse. Like, it's like necessary spending, which is obviously embarrassing for them. But he pointed out that any private or publicly held company that acted this way and kept their finances this way, they would be run out of town. They would be going to jail.
Oh, yeah. I mean, think about how successful Elon was. He cut about, I think it's $175 billion from our budget in the course of 100 days, 120 days that he was in there. I mean, that's $175 billion a year that we're saving because of the work that Elon Musk did. I mean, this is one of the biggest public services that you've seen to the federal government in decades, if not ever.
And I think someone did the math. I mean, this is a meme online. Maybe it's false, but I thought it equaled out to be like $1,000 or $1,500 per taxpayer in America. That seems significant.
That's huge. I mean, imagine if you have an extra $1,000 every year. I mean, that's extraordinary.
So you've been pushing to codify the Doge cuts and lock in Trump's vision for a leaner government. Tell us how that. I mean, imagine that's really difficult. Like fighting an enemy uphill. What's that been like?
Government spending is like heroin for Washington, because every dollar that Washington spends goes to somebody, and it goes to somebody in some congressman's district. And whenever those people hear that we're going to turn the taps off, they're usually not very happy about it, as you would expect. So it really, one thing that's been that I've realized is how perverse the incentive structure is. It's very easy to spend more money. It's very difficult to claw that money back or to spend less. I think that's a problem that the work that Elon Musk did highlights, because now we can really see we're down to the wire. We've got Elon Musk identified all of these cuts. He cut this money. We've got to make these Doge cuts permanent. Can we do it? I think we have to. I think it's something that the president ran on. It's something we all ran on. I mean, we talk about eliminating waste, fraud, and abuse from the federal government all the time. So now let's actually do it.
One thing that was interesting to me, so we've been involved in the reconciliation package, namely to defund Planned Parenthood and to defund, this is so crazy that we're even doing this, but to defund Medicaid's funding of sex change procedures. Like $37 trillion in debt, you would think this is obviously the first thing we should cut is the government funding sex change procedures, which is over $1.4 billion annually.
It's crazy.
Well, one of the things that we're running into in the Senate is we're not sure if the Senate parliamentarian is going to allow that type of cut to stand with cutting sex change. So it's like you said this earlier, it's so difficult to cut even the difficult programs that are somewhat justifiable, but they even have hoops and hurdles to jump through for completely unjustifiable government spending.
Right. I mean, this is money that is a part of mandatory spending right now. It shouldn't be. It affects the budget. It affects the deficit and the debt. I mean, this is something that should pass Senate parliamentarian rules. I mean, I think that would be absurd for them to bird out these provisions. But that's just part of the everyday fight to get anything done here and to pull back any money. But to your point, that's another thing that Republicans, and I don't think this gets talked about enough for this bill. So we've been talking about defunding Planned Parenthood for a long time. I mean, I talked about that on the campaign trail. That's something that's been a big Republican priority. This bill actually does that.
Yes.
I think the second thing that this past election cycle was about, outside of immigration, is the radical transgender ideology, boys and girls sports, transing young children, stuff that to normal people is really, really disgusting. And this bill stops the federal government, at least, from funding those procedures. I mean, that's a huge, huge win.
It cannot be overstated how big of a victory defunding Planned Parenthood is, both in terms of how many abortions they commit every single year. But a lot of people don't realize this. We did a whole report on Planned Parenthood. There are more Planned Parenthood clinics in America that provide transgender procedures like cross-sex hormones and puberty blockers than those that provide abortions. And that was their big business model. So they're like filling in the stopgap as the states have been protecting, people from abortions. Now they're making money off of giving kids sex changes. But this bill, I mean, it's such a big win to defund that horrific institution that does not help people plan parenthood. It helps them eliminate parenthood.
Right, exactly. And, it's amazing how lucrative the transgender business model is. And I think that's probably something else Planned Parenthood picked up on is whether we have abortion or not in whatever state they're operating in, we can promote transgender ideology to young children. We can get them, we can warp their brains into thinking that we're born in the wrong body. And then we can give them these expensive transgender surgeries. And then they're hooked on all kinds of therapy and emotional issues that come out of that. And a lot of people make a lot of money off of that.
Well, one thing that I read that we released in our report anyway is they produced this AI chatbot called Rue, which is open to children as young as 13 years old to go on. And really, it's open to any kid that can get access to the website. But it's a sex robot. Or they talk about sex. They talk about gender. And it's they essentially what Planned Parenthood has done is they built an entire online ecosystem to eliminate parenthood and parents' authority over their children and to confuse and destroy our children sexually. It's absolutely egregious, but I think we've talked about it. I mean, we're winning. We just have to get these over the finish line. I do want to get into the extension of the child tax credits in this bill, because that was a huge win for us.
Yeah, I mean, that was another big one that doesn't get talked about enough, I don't think. I mean, what we're moving towards is a much more pro-family tax policy, much more pro-family Republican Party. We want to create a country where Americans can and have the money and can afford to have lots of children, ideally. I mean, you and I have talked a lot about the greatest joy in life. Second to having a relationship with Christ is marrying and having kids. I just had my second child, first son, about 2 weeks ago.
Can we pull up image A, please? Look at that beautiful family. So Brandon, you were a girl dad first,
Yep.
and now you're a boy dad. Let's unpack this a little bit, because I got boys and girls. I just want to
Yep.
see if your experience is similar to mine. What was it like having a girl, and how does it compare to having a boy?
Marigold is my oldest daughter, only daughter, almost 2 years now, and just so much fun. So much fun. She's she's got to be the most active little girl in the world. She needs constant attention, constant stimulation. Is always making a mess around the house, but it's so much fun to play with her. I mean, that's the hardest thing about this job, is that I don't get to spend as much time as I'd like with her. And now with Winston, my son, and my wife. But those are the things that for a long time in this country, I think most people thought this is, these are the biggest joys that you have in life. This is again, short of having a relationship with Christ, this is your purpose in life, is to raise a family and raise them well, have a family and raise them well, and to get to experience, taking somebody and sort of molding them into going out into the world and doing all kinds of great things. So
I read a quote online a few weeks ago, and it was basically the consolations to parents who are raising young children. And it's basically saying, you can tell well-loved children who are very polite and good in public, but they're absolutely wild and loud at home. And I turned to my wife when I read that. I'm like, our children must feel loved AF, because they are so loud and messy. But you know what? I wouldn't change a thing. They're living, they're loving life, they're happy, and I think that's a real sign that you're doing it right. With all the messes, all the broken things, they feel safe at home to experiment and jump off of couches, broken bones, all that stuff. It's just part of being a dad and part of being a parent, and I'm glad that you're going through this joy as well.
Oh, it's incredible. And you've got how many? 7 kids, is that right?
Yeah, we're up to 7. We got started early though. We got married a lot earlier than a lot of our friends. I was 23, my wife was 24, and we just, I also got a head start in high school. My oldest daughter's in college right now, and she's fantastic, gets amazing grades. But I just love being a dad. For some reason, I always wanted to be a dad. I was never sad about any pregnancy that we ever heard about. I was always excited. Even the one in high school, I was excited about it. So I don't know. I get it. People get afraid of it. Gen Z, they're struggling to get married and have kids, but I think they'll figure it out eventually.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Though, I think that you're always told, it's easy to think that I'm not ready to have kids, but it's one of those things where whenever you do, you are ready. You'll find out that you are.
That testosterone kicks in. You are ready to fight and die for those kids and your wife too. I mean, I think that's the most underappreciated thing that people don't realize is, like, when you get married, it's the first time in your life where you have a lifelong partner, like someone that will go into battle for, especially if you do it right. And I think you and I did it right, but you have someone that will go into battle, into the toughest things, and be there for you. And there's no replacing that.
No, there's not. I mean, I think of in politics, you have a lot of arrows coming at you pretty much all the time, constantly. People trying to harm you, to attack you, to go after you. And the one person who I always know is in my camp and 100% fully on my team is Danielle.
It's such a relief, right? You have that one person forever. I've got that. You've obviously got that. And it helps when they're pretty. That makes it a little bit easier. Well, Congressman, I mean, look, I'm so impressed with what you're doing. Give us a closing message. What should the viewers and listeners know about your time in Congress and the challenges of facing America?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the biggest thing that we should think about as in Congress and as conservatives is that we've got to actually follow through on the things that we say we're going to do on the campaign trail. I think one of the biggest criticisms of Republicans or conservatives has been, you say you're a conservative, but what if conservatives actually conserved? And that to actually conserve the country and to bring us back to the country that we know and love and want to live in requires a fight. It requires us to push back, to speak very loudly and boldly, to take the incoming attacks, which inevitably will come. But that's the only way to get anything done. It's the only way to get our country back on track. And we've talked about a lot of things that we want to do for the country. We want to secure the border. We want to deport illegal aliens. We want to rein in federal spending that's bankrupting the country. We want to defund Planned Parenthood and defund transgender surgeries. I mean, there's a lot of things that we talk about. Now the rubber hits the road and we've got to actually do it.
Well, Congressman, where can people find you online?
You can find me on all social media platforms at Rep. Brandon Gill. And we've also got a news site, a newsletter, and we're on in the media a decent amount as well.
Well, we're all going to be praying for you. You guys have to pray for them. These guys are in real battles. But thank you so much for coming on, and thank you for. I will tell you this. I can't put you in a box. The box I would put you in is the America box, right? And I mean,
good one to be in.
Well, and what I mean by it is you are the congressman that you can't, you have this paleo cons, you have the neocons. You're just God, family, country. And if you summarize America down to three simple things, it's someone that loves God, their family, and their country. And so I'm just so happy that you're in there fighting for my family, fighting for our religious freedom, and fighting for a future of America. So God bless you, Congressman, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.